they fight, 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 fight. And then they're lovey, 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 lovey. And then they play together peacefully. And then before you know it, they're fighting again. What gives? Friends, sibling squabbles, sibling dynamics is one of the most popular questions we have been asked in our Montessori community over and over. And it just seems like nobody has the perfect answer. Is there a perfect answer? We're going to tell you that Montessori can help you overcome a lot of these hurdles, and yet the conflict between two human beings who are both born into this big, beautiful world is very normal.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's actually talk about like why siblings fight in the first place. Where is the conflict coming from?
Yeah, right. I mean, I have a sister, a younger sister. You have a younger brother. I know I fought with my sister and was pesky, and it felt vice versa, and all the other things that go with it.
And you were the older brother, you know, and you describe yourself still as being pesky, which you were.
Yeah, for sure.
But generally we think of like the younger sibling is always annoying the older child, but
That's
it's
right.
not true. It can also happen in reverse.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I think we sometimes would say that, like, we wouldn't describe the older brother being pesky. We would say he's being mean or bullying, right? But it's sort of the same thing. We just use a different word to describe it because of the age dynamic. And it's normal. Where does it come from? Well, one of the places that you might find it is a desire for individual attention. So I don't know if that was the case for me always, but I know there was the desire to be seen and given my own space. Another reason that you see this kind of dynamic is there's a struggle to find your place in the family. Who are you? We see this a lot when you have a new baby in the house, right? And the older kid gets a little more jealous. Who am I now? Or sometimes you see that with the middle child, right? Where the middle child is not the oldest anymore and he's not the baby anymore. And there's sort of a wondering, who am I? How do I fit into this family? And then another is, of course, there's just natural developmental differences. You know, children, as they go through the developmental stages, will enter different periods of readiness for collaboration or isolation. And sometimes those don't necessarily mesh.
Isolation in a good way, though.
Yeah, I mean, how
We
would
tend to
it...
think of isolation as like a negative punishment.
Yeah, exactly.
But like sometimes we just don't want to talk or see anybody. And I think in our culture, we forget that little children are just human beings with needs for being alone sometimes and being with other people sometimes. And that this actually can vary depending on your temperament and personality.
Yeah, for
just
sure.
like it does with us. I feel like as personally as an introvert, I require a lot of introspective alone time. And I'm very happy, like kind of doing my own thing. Not that I never want to be with people, but just like that's kind of my norm, is to seek that alone time and to enjoy the solitude. Solitude is a better word for it rather than isolation.
Okay.
Don't you think?
No, but I'll go with it.
I think solitude is thought of as being really positive. Like we go out into the forest in solitude to
Sure.
seek
Superman
solitude.
has a
But
fortress of solitude.
no one seeks isolation,
Okay.
right?
Well, anyway, what can you... I don't agree, but what can
You don't
no,
agree?
what can you do about this natural occurrence, this sort of natural sibling rivalry? We all experience it to some degree or another. Even in our house, we work really hard to make sure that our two kids don't feel competitive, but it's only natural. But we can do things to help alleviate that tension. And the Montessori method gives us some really good guidance. So what's the first one that kind of leads us along this journey?
Okay. When I think about siblings fighting, I really do think we start with that acceptance that it is a normal struggle, and then come at it instead of the perspective of like, I've got to squash it, see it as an opportunity for you as a parent to help your children learn how to deal with it, because conflict is super, super normal. And one of the things that we do as Montessorians is we integrate it into our curriculum.
That's right.
And I think it's a unique part of Montessori. Not a lot of general teaching philosophies. I'm not going to say none of them, because some obviously, like, there are other teaching methods out there that incorporate a lot of social learning as well. But Montessori is unique in that we build it into our curriculum in ways and places where you normally wouldn't think of it occurring. So one example of this would be within our practical life curriculum. We have an entire curriculum. We can just kind of pull this whole thing out right here. Let's see, these are level 4. That's going to be lower L. Let's take a look at our primary. Can you just pull out the practical life? Within the practical life activities, which, if you're brand new to Montessori, are those super popular activities that you've probably seen on social media, where children are pouring things back and forth, or maybe there's a cute little setup on a tray, and there's some tongs and some beans or something children are transferring, or maybe you've seen a very small child sweep up a spill with a broom. Those are all practical life activities, because they're practical things that we do in our daily lives that we don't necessarily think children need to be taught. But there is a subcategory of practical life that Montessori guides know that you probably wouldn't really necessarily know if you were just learning Montessori from social media, primarily just looking at those images, because it doesn't really feature very well on social media, because it's a role play. And that is our grace and courtesy lessons. So it's actually a whole, I don't know if you found any cards in here that were labeled grace and courtesy. Yeah, there's one. So here's an example. This is an example of a regular practical life activity that you probably have seen before: rug rolling, buttoning, snapping, zipping, so self-care.
Yeah, so these are the more, I don't know, when we think about practical life and you're cruising the Instagrams or whatever, you're going to see depictions of this kind of stuff because it films easily, right? It looks cute, but there's a lot within the practical life domain that doesn't really film as easily, but super important, and that would be your grace and courtesy lessons. Things like, or on our card here, these are level 1, blowing one's nose, coughing, sneezing, yawning, opening and closing books, decorating the peace table. So things related to grace and courtesy, how to sort of carry oneself. And these would be lessons you'd be teaching to a 2-year-old.
Yeah, so grace and courtesy lessons are very, very powerful, because it's an opportunity to teach our children these skills, maybe even before or sometimes after they've experienced them in real life. So think about the classic example that's in our primary curriculum that always makes people laugh is Maria Montessori herself did this very dramatic lesson on blowing one's nose appropriately. And she did this, just sit down in front of the children and demonstrated how to properly, and I imagine she did this while wearing her Victorian garb.
Sure.
Blow one's nose, into a tissue, and or probably a kerchief,
Yes,
in the time it would have been a kerchief, right?
That's right.
And at the time, the children were fascinated because they'd never seen anybody actually demonstrate how to do such a basic skill. And here, Marie Montessori, the very fancy, beautiful lady. Here she was coming in and showing the children how to do this kind of gross,
rude thing.
This rude thing, right? But the children, she found, and she kind of thought, I think she thought, and we laugh at it today because it's kind of a silly lesson, but I think that she thought that the children would think it was funny. Like, she came in and did this big dramatic presentation thinking that the children would see kind of the humor in it and just, go along with it. Okay, that's how you blow your nose. Haha, it was kind of fun, right? But instead, the children were overcome with gratitude. And they some of them began to cry, and they came up and they hugged her and they thanked her for giving them this lesson on how to blow one's nose appropriately. And she herself was overcome by emotion because she realized like no one had bothered to teach these children this very basic thing before, like, and they felt grateful because now they wouldn't have runny noses and just be making a big goopy mess of things. They now knew the proper way to be in polite society, right?
Or just practice some basic hygiene.
Yeah, and so
take care of
that's, that's not necessarily about discipline or siblings exactly, but Maria Montessori, this was like the beginning of the grace and courtesy development of this part of the practical life curriculum. And so after having this experience with, teaching the children how to blow their nose, she realized, oh, there's so many other lessons that we could teach children about how, I think we think of it as like manners, or being polite out and about, things that you need to know in order to get along with other people and to kind of behave in a way that's accepted by your culture. And so grace and courtesy lessons can be very, very different depending on where you're from.
True.
In some cultures, maybe you want to teach children how to handshake, how to shake someone's hand. In another culture, maybe it's a hug or kisses on the cheek. That's or, right. There's just a million different types of lessons that we could give children about how to behave or present themselves when with other people. And a component of that is being with the people who are in your intimate community around you, and that includes siblings. And so there's lots and lots of grace and courtesy lessons that you could give your children to help them with that sibling dynamic. Do any come to your mind right away?
Well, I mean, the most obvious to me would be like a peace table.
Yes.
Yeah, the resolution.
Right, and making peace. And we even have this, right down here, we have these listed as lessons in our little cards for GNC, Grace and Courtesy.
Yeah, so just to clarify, these cards are the scope and sequence. I think sometimes we don't clarify that enough. So we've taken the whole scope and sequence for ages 2 to 9, and we've created a card system that will allow you to work through the scope and sequence and follow your child at the same time. So when we talk about our cards and we talk about our levels, what we're describing is our scope and sequence. And so a level 1 would be earliest skills, and then level 3, this would be at the end of the road for our practical life, which only goes through level 3 because it's a primary. And so at this stage, you've already introduced the peace table, and now you're doing things like mediation at the peace table, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's lots and lots of lessons. We could even come up with other lessons outside of these. I tell the members in our courses, like, there's an endless number of grace and courtesy lessons you could give,
for sure.
And you can think them up yourself. And so this is actually a really good strategy for parents to use when helping their children, which we assume that they have siblings if they're working through this particular issue. If you don't have more than one child, maybe your child plays with friends or a cousin, or just conflict with other family members. All of this is the same strategy that works for all of it. But if you're thinking particularly about, let's say your 2 children who just can't stop bickering with each other, you might think about what is happening just before the bickering.
Well, this goes back to what we talked about with like why conflict is normal and what causes it, right? So when you're thinking through to the point where you're having a grace and courtesy lesson and you're asking and modeling and encouraging them to resolve, part of what you're thinking about is, did the conflict arise from a desire for individual attention? Were they fighting over resources like a toy or a space? Is there just a natural kind of incongruity between the developmental stages? And that can help you as you are helping prepare the environment, so to speak, for the mediation to happen.
Yeah, so let's say what happens just before 2 children start fighting in the car. Let's think. What were they doing before? Like, do they know how to entertain themselves in the car? Do they understand the concept of like where one's personal space ends? I know that's a particular issue for us with our kids, or always has been. Like, one is always pushing his foot into the other space. And so it's not like you can, train them to never have conflict in these areas. There will be ways that they find to annoy each other for the rest of their lives, I'm sure. But a lesson that you might give that's a grace and courtesy lesson that might not be listed in the curriculum, but that's a tangent from it, a way you could use it in your Montessori home, is you could say, hey, like, we're really having a whole lot of problems in the car. Like, that's where a lot of the fighting is happening. And so what kind of grace and courtesy lessons can I teach about being in the car that would be helpful for them to avoid conflict? And so one of those things might be just a lesson about where your personal space is in the car, and where you keep your things, and where things belong, and how your body, like, so in a Montessori way, we could role play this by pretending to get into your car seat and, keeping your feet on your side, right? And I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's actually, could be a Montessori lesson. It's a very, very legitimate Montessori lesson.
Totally.
Another could be like, I know in a classroom you often, or at least we often heard the words like, keep your hands to yourself, or like, don't touch your neighbor. Okay, but obviously just telling kids like, don't touch your neighbor isn't going to stop them from touching them.
Yeah, right.
But in a Montessori situation, you might give a lesson on where to put your hands, because sometimes children just like don't know. And so we might give a lesson about like, you could put your hands in your lap like this, or you could put them in your pockets, or you could put them behind your back, or you could, just hang them in front of you. But like teaching them a proactive, positive way to handle their own personal space in their body can be really powerful. Yeah. So another thing is that we can also create ways for children to practice. You mentioned the peace table. We can create ways for children to practice that conflict resolution.
Yeah.
And, we don't have time to get into that whole gateway of positive discipline in this session right now. But if anyone is out there and they're wondering, like, I'm struggling with this, where do I go with actually resolving the conflict? Positive discipline, gentle discipline that is your pathway. But in the Montessori context, we can also use all kinds of lessons to teach children how to work together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you look in any of our lessons, I know you've got
a challenge.
Okay, a challenge. I know you've got the lower L ones right there. I've got our primary curriculum. No,
I have
vice versa.
Yeah.
Here's practical life from the primary curriculum. I've got our lower L curriculum. And I'm going to pull one out too. I'm actually going to just yank one out.
Okay. Well, I've got mine.
Okay, I've got mine. I pulled mine from Level 5 Life Science.
I also pulled Life Science.
You did? Oh my gosh, we're really in sync. Okay,
yes.
Well, read me one of your lessons.
Parts of a flower.
Parts of a flower.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so this is a level 3 from the Green Grass Grows. Parts of a flower.
Well, how could we use that lesson to teach children how to be better siblings with each other?
Now, are you talking metaphorically?
No,
or?
I'm talking about literally with that lesson. How
Well,
could we,
you would
how
have
could
a
we
limited-
turn that into a collaborative lesson is what I'm asking.
So parts of a flower could be taught with parts cards, which have a puzzle-like quality. And in fact, we saw an example of siblings completing a categorizing activity. It wasn't parts cards, but it was a categorizing activity together. He had an older brother, I think, and a younger brother. We saw a video of this recently, one of our members.
Okay.
And do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, it was very cute. And they were working together. And mom was there kind of guiding it.
Yeah.
And she would hold the card up. Oh, I know which one it was. It was from our pets unit. It was the cat, and then you would find a sentence. The cat is hungry. And then you would find a command, feed the cat.
Oh, yes.
All right, and so
That's
the brothers
right. I do remember that now. It
worked
was great.
together to solve the puzzle.
I think it was a photo, not a video.
No, definitely a video.
It was a video?
Yeah, because we saw them working together. And I thought it was a beautiful, like, so they're different. I think they were different ages.
Yeah.
Well, an older one and a younger one. But it was beautiful to see them working together. So I think that's an example of how you would bring kids together to work together collaboratively on a project. And actually, that is our second tip. It's you would create collaborative work activities for them to practice these grace and courtesy ideas, right? So you're instilling them with the grace and courtesy mindset, and there are specific lessons that you can give them to help reinforce that. And of course, as you were saying, there could be even more than the ones that we would include in our curriculum, because grace and courtesy really is just sort of like how we conduct ourselves in polite society in order to, help with social cohesion and to feel good about ourselves and to practice good hygiene and all those sorts of things. Right? So as they're internalizing that, you would then give them opportunities to practice, and those opportunities to practice could be pulled right from your curriculum. So this is where we would say this is kind of goes back to the premise of multi-age teaching and why it's so great, because it gives you a chance to bring different ages and stages together and have them collaborate and practice not only the academic concept, but the collaborative, loving, graceful, courteous process.
Okay, that was actually a good one. So parts of a flower, you could maybe get one flower out and work with both children to name the parts together.
Yep.
And identify them. It's a perfectly fine lesson to do. It was kind of like a random example that we pulled that one out. What I pulled out was botanical nature journaling.
Okay.
Which also is a life science activity.
And that's
it's
for
in
an
level
older
5.
one, right? Yeah.
It's in our lower elementary curriculum, but is there any reason why you couldn't also have your younger child doing botanical nature journaling?
So
Absolutely no reason.
how would you bring grace or the collaboration to life with this journaling? Because journaling is, well, not isolated,
No.
but solitary.
It does feel like it's a solitary activity. Well, what came to mind was maybe the concept of like a journal itself is kind of a solitary activity. But I remember doing a lot of projects with our two kids where they would each journal something or draw something. And then I would draw something, and we would make as many pages as we would want, and we would staple it together to make a book together. And so what it would look like is, one page would be, a book about plants, by and then the 3 of our names, and then the next page would be one that maybe our oldest child drew with like a sentence about the plant that he found while we were out in nature. And then we turn the page and there would be like a page of scribbles where I had asked our youngest what he wanted to say about his plant, and he might have said something like, "My plant has teeth and eats flies." All right. But you can't tell. It's like a big scribbled mess. And then you turn the next page, and then maybe it's my example. And we just make a whole bunch of pages and staple them together. And we actually did a lot of that when they were in this particular age group. And I think that it's teaching your oldest. Now, if your oldest doesn't want to participate in this own thing, they want to make their own book, that's fine. But it is an example of a really easy way that you could make a collaborative project while everybody retains their own individual piece of it that they're contributing.
it's
Like
a
you're
great
contributing
idea.
something to the group project, and you set it up ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like, we together are going to create a book or a map or a game or whatever it is, a project that you're creating, and then each person brings something to the table.
That's right. And I think what you might hear is the older brother say he ruins it, or the older sister say she ruins it, right? Like, oh, I don't want them to mess up my journal.
Right.
Like, I worked real hard on it. And that's understandable. This goes back to what are the sources of sibling conflict. And some of it is that sometimes the child just needs to feel that their work needs to be respected, and they don't understand why they have to share it. It's important to them. And in those cases, it might not be the right time to introduce that, no, we're going to do a collaborative lesson. However, it often is a good idea to at least approach it with the older child. And this goes to, like, grace and courtesy is really, you need to think of it as an academic subject in itself. It's not just niceties or disciplinary, a discipline goal, right? It's a mindset. And so coming to the older child beforehand, as you said, and say, I want to do this natural journal together, or we're going to do this travel journal, or whatever it is, nature journal. We're going to go to the botanical gardens, and I want you guys each to make your own, and we're going to put them together. And your brother, he can't write the same way that you can, but he really, really loves participating. And I think it'd be so nice to have one book for all of it together. And if you set the right context, you can create a situation where the older brother can start to feel really proud of the leadership that he feels with his younger sibling. And that, especially if they're in that lower L, that second plane, can be super empowering, because they're in an age of ethics and moral decision making, and that sense of the big brother has something to share and loves and protects his little brother or sister is really, really powerful. That's an expression of love that's appropriate for that age.
This is bringing back memories, actually. I think humor is a really important tool that we can use in this. It doesn't work for all children, but I remember doing a lot of, we would, our oldest and I would look at the page of scribbles that the youngest had just done, and we would kind of wink to each other like, oh, yes, this is a picture of the Venus flytrap. I see it's right here. And then our oldest would join in the fantasy aspect of it and say, oh, yes, are these the teeth? I think I see one of the teeth right here. And the youngest would just like puff up with, pride and just be like, yeah, that is one of the teeth. And I think that those kind of invitations to give compliments, or to, maybe even if it's not just like, I like it or I love it, it's like a descriptive praise type of
compliment. Which is the way praise should be, like, for adults to children as well.
Yeah, I think that creating those opportunities for your youngest to interact with your oldest's work, and give feedback on it, positive feedback or acknowledgement of the hard work, and so you're right, like, in order to set the stage for those kind of positive collaborative experiences, it was helpful to talk first to the oldest child, usually our oldest, who in our context is 3 years older and was well aware, of the difference in skills,
I didn't always want to share.
Yeah. And so, no, but talking ahead of time, like getting a game plan, like, we made this book, and I want you to know, your younger brother, he worked real hard on his, and we want to make sure that he really feels like we see his hard work. And just saying something like that, not saying, so you better be nice, or so, we're going to give him compliments even though you think it's, terrible. None of that. We just like set the stage positive, like we're going to have this experience. And yes, I know he doesn't draw like you. You know what a Venus flytrap really looks like, right? And the oldest will be like, well, yeah. Then I'll be like, but his motor skills are still developing. And just being really honest about the differences there. Now, would this work with twins? No. Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
even
know.
as the kids get older and
The
they're
collaborative work definitely can.
yeah, and
you
as
know?
they get older and their differences change, I think even with twins, it's natural to have a kind of a sense of rivalry between the two.
Oh, for sure.
So and I think that's where
And also maybe different skill levels.
totally.
you know,
And so what I'm
different things.
hearing that I want to underscore from you that goes with the concept of grace and courtesy. There's no guile there. Like you're not denigrating the younger's work in order to win favor with the older or to puff him up. What makes him feel good is that he's being invited to share in an adult experience. You're acknowledging that he has developed a skill that is better in some like objectively better, right? He can draw the shape of the fly trap more accurately to nature without comparing him to his brother as being worse or superior or inferior. Just rather, we're together. You've got something here. He's going to get there too. We're really excited. You couldn't do this at one point either, but we're all learning together. And there's no trickery or guile or deceit. It's or an attempt to play it cool or something. Or bribe. There's no bribery. There's no negative attention. And so that's a kind of a piece to it. Like inviting the older child into that experience will be empowering.
Yeah, this example was a bit esoteric. We just randomly picked things from the curriculum to talk about how we could make it a collaborative activity. But I'm going to give some really concrete ways that are probably a bit easier to think of. And that is like, think about practical life activities that kids could do together, whether it's raking leaves, although that's kind of thought of as outdated these days, isn't it? Like you're supposed to mulch the leaves and then let them decompose. I think raking leaves is still fun, right? You make big piles. But like working together to do things, like working outside together. You each, you take the wheelbarrow this time full of the heavy stuff. Now it's your sibling's turn. Like we're working together to create something as a family unit or as a partnership. And you'll see your children do this on their own as well. Children do it naturally. They go to the playground and it's so funny to watch them because if there's no obvious work to be done, they will make work. They will load up their dump trucks and start hauling them from one side of the sandbox to the other. And you're like, as a school teacher, when we had sandboxes, it was like, this happened all the time. Like sand was constantly being transported from one side of the playground to the other. Why? Because it's something that you can do together and it feels good and it's sensory. But you'll see children kind of organizing each other, their peers and their siblings to like make sure that like all of this stuff gets all over here and we're all working together to make sure that it happens. And it's great. Those are just natural collaborative activities. You can also play games with your kids, but I recommend that unless your kids are like really into the lower plane, and even then sometimes like competitive games can make the sibling rivalry worse. And
for sure.
Yeah, I know. You really love competitive games, and so I don't know if you had a different experience growing up with them, but for younger children especially, I think collaborative games are going to lead you to more positive sibling happy relationships, and competitive games can really make things harder.
Well, I think when you use competitive games where one, especially the younger or smaller, is always at a disadvantage, it feels demoralizing. I think if you have a competitive game and there's an equality, it can be fun and natural. And healthy competition is an important part of human existence. It doesn't have to mean exploitation or dominance or corruption. But it can feel good, especially I know, like I'll speak for our own boys, like competition, especially physical competition, is just sort of in them. They want to see who can run faster, jump higher. They just did it last night when they were, they're older teens now, and they raced home. They tried to race each other from the park, and they just naturally kind of came up with it. So I think competition in itself is not bad. I think it's when you associate it with these high stakes, or you create circumstances where it's just unfair. Like you can never, of course, the 7-year-old is always going to be able to run faster than the 3-year-old. Right? Or beat him in checkers or something.
Right. But how about like a game of chance? Like we've got lots and lots of games out there that are being made for kids that involve a clear winner and a clear loser. And in my experience, older kids like ours who are already teenagers, upper L kids generally handle that much better.
Well, they're in the second plane. They haven't
the second half of the second plane.
Yeah, so they develop ethical reasoning.
Children under the age of 9,
they have not developed.
They don't handle
reasoning.
it well.
Yeah, they haven't. They're not at the. They haven't matured through the moral age yet, and so the world is more black and white. I mean, it's literally a sensorial world for babies, and it's a long walk from the sensorial to the full abstract world of, let's say, a 12-year-old. Right. By the time you get to 12, you've kind of a 12-year-old's brain and an adult's brain aren't dissimilar, really that dissimilar in terms of what they can like learn and remember and process. But before you get to that point, there's a lot of maturation that has to happen. And so I agree. I think cooperative games are great.
Well, fortunately, there are a lot more options for cooperative games.
But my answer to your question of like the competitive game, if it's a game of chance, I think part of it, and this goes with like a 3-year-old isn't going to understand this, but it's still something you can convey. You did nothing to win if it's a game of chance. Like it's just the luck of the draw, and that there's also a life lesson in that as well about fairness and how games work and play, and then putting your own victory in the right context. And again, I think for a 3 or 4-year-old, they're not gonna get that, but I think this is a lesson you'd want to start teaching a second plane child, to have them understand.
And second plane is 6 and up.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, what you want them to understand is
what I've
life is not
noticed
fair.
Under 6s, kids can completely lose it when they lose the game.
Sure.
And just be super frustrated when you could get into tantrum land.
Sure.
They just developmentally aren't in a place to really be able to understand that kind of competition. So I guess I hear what you're saying, that competitive games aren't necessarily bad, that they offer good lessons to teach children about life and about...
They can be fun.
And they can be fun. But if you're thinking specifically about sibling dynamics and you've got children that are tending to bicker and pester each other and fight, competitive games aren't going to get you
You're just going to enhance the rivalry.
Right. You're just going to stoke a fire. And so my personal thought is, if you've got an issue like this with young children, stay away from the competitive games until they're older and their relationship is a little more stable.
Yeah, if you're a Roman emperor and you're trying to create a brood of cutthroat offspring to challenge for the throne, then I would say go all in on the competitive games. But if you're like trying to teach a loving relationship, and then yes, I think you have to be mindful of how the competitive game works, especially when there is an inherent disadvantage on one side because of age, ability, size, something like that. And I think that's where we can get in trouble. It's family game night. We're all going to play together. The 5-year-old is old enough to play Uno, but doesn't really have the maturity to play in the same way as the 8-year-old. How do you invite the 5-year-old in to play? It's a competitive game by nature. It's not a cooperative game, right? Uno is an example. How do you allow the 5-year-old to participate, knowing that the 5-year-old probably won't win as frequently because they won't have the same, they just don't have the same maturity and intellectual capacity as the older children. And you want to invite them into play. You don't want to exclude them, but you also want to make sure that they're not feeling disadvantaged, harmed, angered. You know, you're feeding the kind of a jealousy.
A lot of games can be made to be collaborative, even if they're set up to be competitive games. There are ways to do it. And so I would encourage you, if you do have a whole lot of competitive games out there, to play with the rules, because you can tweak the rules often to make it a little more fair for everyone, and I think more fun.
This is something we've argued about for many, many years. We haven't talked about this in a long time.
No, I guess we haven't.
We have argued about competitive versus collaborative games for many decades now.
Oh.
And the answer is I don't know, it's a personality choice. But I would say that there is definitely an emphasis on collaborative games, especially for younger ones, is great. I think actually a lot of modern games emphasize collaboration, like Dungeons and Dragons. Emphasize collaboration or can emphasize collaboration. But competitive games can also be really fun and appealing, and you just need to be aware that there can be unintended consequences, which actually is a great way to segue into our final tip, which is set the expectation for love and friendship.
Yes. Okay. All right. So we agree to disagree about competitive games.
This is twice we've agreed to disagree in this episode. Solitude versus isolation.
Yeah, we
and
agree to
competitive
disagree about
versus
that.
competition. This is a disagreement.
Place your vote, friends.
I don't know what's going on today.
Team isolation or team solitude? Are you team competitive games or team collaborative games?
I don't know what's going on today. It's July 1st. It must be the day of
Yes, okay,
rivalry.
so we probably should explain the games thing. David grew up in a house where you guys played games constantly. And he's really good at them too.
But I lost all the time.
I don't care that you lost all the time.
Just because you say I'm good at them doesn't mean that I always won, and that's why I love them.
No, here's what I mean by you're good at them. When you get a new game, you can read the rules that go with the game and understand them, and then teach everyone else what to do. And when I get a new game, I look at it and I read those rules 10 times, and I'm like, this makes no sense to me, and why is this fun? Is this fun? And then we start playing the game, and I'm like, I think it's fun. Is this fun? It's not really fun. I mean, it's fun that other people are having fun, and that's how I have fun playing games. But they're just not my thing. And so, you're looking at two people, one loves games to pieces and will play any game, and the other, please, if I never had to play another game in my life, I would be happy.
Next week on Old Married Couple Live, we will be talking about brown rice versus wild rice. No.
I know. Okay, so anyway, my tip is make all the competitive games collaborative games, and then everybody's happy. And, tips from a longtime gamer.
To set the expectation for love and friendship. And you will have...
And then play whatever games you like and just help everyone deal with the loser vibes. Okay, so...
This is a very revelatory episode.
I know. We did just have our 25th, so, these are all the things we had to work through, and I guess we're still working through them. Okay, so love and friendship is the third tip. This is probably the most important tip dealing with siblings. You can teach all the grace and courtesy lessons that you want. You can create all the collaborative work and gaming opportunities that you can think of. You can teach all the lessons and think of ways to make a lot of them collaborative so that you can work together as a family towards a common goal. But if you haven't agreed in your heart and in your mindset that you are setting this expectation that there will forever be this baseline of love and friendship in your family, then the rest is just not going to work. And I know this one is a little bit nebulous. There's lots of practical things you can do with positive discipline. There's lots of practical things you can do with collaborative lessons together and those grace and courtesy. But when it comes to setting the expectations for love and friendship, I want to be really clear that we have had like thousands of conversations with our kids where we start the conversation with, you guys are each other's best friends.
Yeah, you
know,
are
or-
always brothers. Like,
or-
you'll never not be brothers. And it is a special and unique and precious relationship. And you will rely on each other and need to be able to rely on each other for many, many years to come. You know, at some point, we will be in a different stage of life, and you're going to have to make decisions together about our health and our well-being. Like, that's just the way it is. It's a natural course of things, and the foundation you're building today as siblings is what will carry you forward as you go through these many travails in life, including how you handle things like your elderly parents, or when you get a job and you have to move far away, how do you continue to stay in touch with each other? Or if you have kids, how do you bring them together and have cousins together? Like, the things that you will have to navigate in life. You'll have many friends, and hopefully you'll have a loving partner, a spouse that will be with you by your side for the whole of your life as well. You may not always agree with that person, but you will be with them. But your brother is special. Your brother is unique, and you should value that. And setting that expectation from the get-go is vital. I would say it is the paramount obligation. Like, it really will determine everything else. If you want to, I use that. I kind of jokingly was talking about like the Roman emperor, but that is actually how it was, right? There are family structures where they intentionally set out to create competitiveness within amongst their children, and that's their goal. If that's your goal, then you know how to do that. You create circumstances and stakes where they have to vie for limited resources like love and affection. However, if you don't want to do that, you have to be just as crystal clear that in this house, we love each other and we hold each other very close and sacred and dear. And that is especially true for our brothers and sisters.
I remember starting this with our oldest when our second was born, actually. In our first introduction, as he met the new baby for the very first time, we were still in the hospital, we introduced him as his new best friend. Like, he's your brother, and he's going to be your brother forever, and he's going to be your friend, like your best ever friend forever. And I think, like, it's not that a 3-year-old during such a monumental time can understand the significance of that. But I think that, like, setting it forward from the very first day, like, this is how it's going to be. Guess what? You're going to be on the same team forever. It's not going to be you and us against the other one, or it's not going to be me and you against him and him. It's going to be the two of you and the two of us, and we're here to guide and love and support you as a family, but you're in it together, kids. Like, this is your generation. This is your gift to each other, and it's a gift of love and support, and it's something that you can have for the rest of your life. And it's just an amazing gift. And children are obviously not going to feel that all the time or really understand it, probably until they're grown up. But I think that setting that expectation, rather than saying, I think we could set an opposite expectation. And some families do. They're like, I have 2 kids, and maybe they like each other, and maybe they don't, and it doesn't matter. They're 2 different people. They've got different personalities. Some siblings like each other. Some siblings don't really get along. Do your kids get along? And so we actually have gotten that question a lot, and there's actually been a lot of surprise around our kids when they are in public interacting. Strangers will like be watching our kids, and then they'll come up to us and they'll be like, boy, your kids really get along. That's so great that you have kids that get along, that really like each other. Do they always get along? And we're like, of course they don't always get along. Like, of course they fight sometimes. And secret, their fights can be really, really big. Okay, their conflict can be really, really big.
Sure.
But I think that some people just don't enter into this family relationship with the expectation, the strong expectation that you are growing a pair or a trio or a quartet
tuple or what, quintet
of human beings that are just intimately connected with each other with friendship. And I think that that expectation can make a big, big difference in how close they are. So it's not just that we're lucky that our kids were close or that our kids get along, like as if they could get along or they could not get along. It's one or the other. It's not. Sometimes they're going to have conflict, but they're going to get along. Like they're together. They love each other. They're going to be best friends. We tell them this all the time. You guys are so lucky, to have each other and that you are friends with each other. It's so special and precious, and we tell them outright, like, you should know not everybody has this with their sibling. There are a lot of siblings that don't have this relationship, and it's a treasure, and you guys should really work hard to keep it. And we have witnessed over the course of their lives growing up to teenagehood them understanding that developing that relationship takes work and effort.
A lot of work.
And it has taken a lot of effort on our part as well to be mediators when there is conflict, and also to allow them to solve some of their own conflicts, as hard as that is. Want to solve their problems all the time. Like, we try and play the balance between that. Like, if someone's about to get injured or punch each other, we intervene. But otherwise, if they're just like arguing or disagreeing about it, we tend to try and take a back seat and let them work it out themselves, and then give them suggestions for ways that they might handle it. And the way David and I do this in real life is we do a lot of tag teaming. Fortunately, we have each other. And I know that there are a lot of single parents out there, and hopefully you have someone in your life that you can take a little load off with, and that it could be anyone. It could be a grandma, it doesn't just have to be a married partner, or spouse. It could be somebody else in your life, but it really is helpful to tag team and to take one kid aside and to talk to them about strategies for how they might approach this conflict or this situation, or something that might make a sibling feel better or more prideful or braver. And it just takes a lot of time and work to foster it. But I think that really what it comes down to is that commitment that you are going to raise children who love each other, period. Like, you're not going to raise kids that don't get along.
Yeah, and I guess that's the bottom, that for me, that's kind of the underlying point is, I think a lot of it, we don't all set out to create a team of rivals, so to speak, but I think a lot of times if we're not intentionally creating a brotherhood or a siblinghood, that can be one of the consequences. Now again, sibling rivalries are normal. They come, even really well-functioning team.
Totally, the
siblings
jealousy
will
comes.
get jealous. They'll fight. Sometimes they may fight big. It happens. But if your expectation as a family, as a parent, is one of love, then
and responsibility
right.
too. Like, we tell both of our kids, like, it's not the oldest job to protect the younger always. It's a vice versa. Like,
Totally.
they have the responsibility to protect and love each other.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And we just make that really clear with them all the time. We have since they were very, very, very little. And if you don't take the time to do that, then I can't guarantee what your results are going to be. But I can say, like, if you take the time and you are committed to it, growing children who have healthy boundaries, who have a good sense of self, and understand what it means to love and be a good friend to another human being, then your chances of raising kids who will be good friends for life are really good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our tips. So, in essence, grace and courtesy, collaborative work. These are the Montessori things that you can do that are very practical, and setting that expectation of love. Like, those are our tips for you for handling sibling dynamics at home in a very realistic Montessori way.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. So if you'd like to learn more about that, or if you do need a crash course in gentle discipline techniques, you can join our unlimited plan and you get free and full access to our Loving Discipline course. And this year, just like last year, I got to teach that course live. We did real workshop sessions in February.
Yep.
And you're welcome to join.
Totally. Yeah, that's right. It's one of the many perks of being an unlimited member. If you'd like to know more about our unlimited plan or any of our plans, go to childoftheredwoods.com and click on the plans section. All right. Well, we are out of time today, so we will see you in 1 week. I hope it is the 4th of July here in the U.S., so I hope if you're out there celebrating, have fun and be safe, and we will see you in a week.
All right.